Hello, I'm glad you're here today. This is Jennifer McGuire. In this video, I am creating a bunch of cards and sharing lots of ideas and techniques. But while doing so, I also thought I would talk a little bit about how I go about building creativity. Now, this is not rocket science. These are all very simple things, and I'm hoping that one or two of them will work for you. My most asked question is what do I do when I lose my mojo or my creativity? So in this video, I'm talking about things that you can do to prevent that from happening. Again, all simple things, but sometimes just putting them all together is helpful and a good reminder. So let's get started. I'm going to create cards and share ideas for building creativity as I go. For my first batch of cards, I'm using the new Altenew Nature Splashes stencil set. Now this is different for me, but I think it's really cool. And I think one of the best ways to build creativity is to try things that are outside of your wheelhouse or what you're used to. And this fits the bill for me. And I loved playing with it. So in the stencil set, you have a stencil that has all those sentiments, which I think is really cool. And then 3 layering stencils that you see on the bottom right that create a fun kind of artistic looking background. Then you've got the stencil that creates all those leaves, and then the stencil that adds some details up there on the right. Another reason I was drawn to this is because of that greeting stencil, this detail stencil at the top, and the leaf stencil. Those can be used with other things, so it really extends the life of the set. I also really liked the card example that Altenew has in their packaging. I thought these colors were really cool and unique, something different than what I normally would do. This is another way to build creativity, is to try different types of color combinations, things you normally wouldn't use, because it'll make you feel more comfortable with the colors you have in your stash and using them in different ways. Now I have 4 pieces of cardstock here. I have white, I have peach, and I have cream. So I thought I'd make 4 backgrounds at once. I'll talk more about that in a moment. I'm starting with the first stencil and I'm placing it onto the Altenew sticky mat, which will hold my paper and my stencil in place. I'm following along with that example in the Altenew packaging. And I'm doing multiple colors over one stencil. You could simplify it by doing one color over the whole thing, but I'm doing multiple so I can get a similar look to the example they have. I'm using Altenew Fresh Dye inks. Their inks are beautiful and blend nicely, and Altenew mini blending brushes, which you see me use often. So I'm making 4 card panels here. They're all 4¼ by 5½ inches. I could have started with bigger, but with these stencils, I really wanted to know where my pattern was ending up, and so I felt it best to have it trimmed down. Now I have 2 pieces of white cardstock, 1 cream and 1 peach, because I want to experiment with doing stenciling on colored cardstock versus white cardstock, which I'll do more of later in this video. I also am creating 4 panels because I feel another great way of building creativity is repetition. When you do the same process over and over, it really makes it more comfortable. And it allows you to feel more comfortable the next time you need to be creative. I remember in my engineering classes in college, you would do homework examples multiple times when you'd study for the test. By doing it repetitively, it really kind of made it sink in so it was more comfortable. And then you could build on that. And I think the same with creativity. So a big tip, one of my biggest tips for building creativity is to create a few at a time. And then you can change each one a bit and try new things, which you'll also see me do later. And by the way, if you want to learn more about creating 4 cards at a time and how it's helpful, be sure to check out our online card class called So Very Merry. There are 16 videos, and in each video, we batch create 4 cards. And really, that's all about building up creativity in the end. And the best part is you have multiple cards to give to people. Now, I wanted to talk about what I'm doing here. I'm actually putting down light purple ink, that's wisteria, and then on top of it putting puffy heart pink ink. The reason I'm doing that is in the Altenew example, they had like a purplish pink ink over this part of the stencil, but I didn't have that color in my stash, so I'm creating my own. I'm mixing 2 colors to get a new one, and this new color is beautiful. This is another simple way to build creativity. Try mixing your inks to create new colors. It's very simple, but it really helps you to better understand the colors you have so that you can be more creative with them. It's really about getting to know and getting comfortable with our stash so that we can just think outside of the box with how to use them. Now notice here I have like a peach color cardstock. The purple and pink is going to look different on this. And this is one of the things I'm experimenting with. I'm trying this inking process on colored cardstock to see if I like it in the end. Trying new things or kind of testing out some ideas is an excellent way to build up that creativity. I do know that trying too many new things at once can be overwhelming and actually kind of hold back your creativity. So here I went with a card example that I could follow. I'm using the colors and the design. That kind of simplifies everything so that I can try a few new things on it without feeling overwhelmed. So I'm trying a new to me color combination, something really unique. I'm trying a new style. This is very different than what I normally do. And I'm trying little things like overlapping ink colors and also a bit of mixed media, which you'll see in a moment. So kind of pick and choose. Don't try to do all new things on one card if you tend to get overwhelmed when you craft. Instead, pick some things that you're comfortable with and then just try a few or even one new element on it. All right, so I'm continuing here with my backgrounds. Now I'm onto these leaves. Now notice the center of those leaves are very, very detailed, and I'm afraid they'll move as I ink over them. So I did something that I don't do often. I use pixie spray on the back of the stencil. I usually don't use it because I find a sticky mat works just fine. If you don't have pixie spray, you can put a little temporary tape runner like dot adhesive on the back of the stencil in those intricate parts, and it'll help to hold it in place. I'm also masking off 2 of the leaves because, again, I'm following the design in the Altenew packaging, and they only use those 2 leaves. I'm again following the color combination also from the packaging. So what I'm doing right now isn't like testing my creativity in any way, right? But while I'm thinking about what I'm going to do next. So in those times where I'm doing just repetitive, easy things in my crafting, I'm kind of thinking about what I can do next and try next. Now I decided I wanted a 3rd leaf in the bottom there, so I would have kind of a visual triangle. That's different than their sample, but sometimes you need to put your own spin on things. So I have 4 backgrounds so far that I've created by using the stencils alone. And I also have this blue and green one that I made off screen earlier when I was just playing around. I thought it'd be fun to experiment with more things that I can do to these backgrounds to kind of step up the mixed media look, kind of make it artsy looking and add some texture. So onto these stenciled backgrounds, I'm first going to use an embossing folder. This will give us some texture and pull the background together. I'm using a new embossing folder that has repeated thank you sentiments along the back. I love this folder. It is similar to the raised sentiments embossing folder that came out a few months ago. Here is a card that I made with that folder doing a really cool technique. I have linked to that video in the description below if you want to check it out. Now the embossing folder I used on this card has a mix of sentiments, but this new embossing folder I'm using today are all thank you sentiments, and I'm really excited about it as I make a lot of thank you cards. So I'm putting my first background into the embossing folder, the thank you embossing folder, and I'm running it through my die cut machine, and look at that great texture we get. I just think this adds some fun to that background. You can never go wrong with texture. Next, I thought I'd add some ink to those raised words just to make them stand out a bit more. I thought I would first try using a brayer and the Lisa Horton metallic ink. This is the copper color. By the way, these are back in stock and they are beautiful. So I'm gently rolling the copper ink over the raised areas, and then I made a mistake. I started to roll in the other direction, which made the brayer kind of go in between the lines of words. I should have just gone horizontal only. So I ended up getting some ink in the background, but that's okay. With the style of card, I don't mind that. So you can see some of the ink on the background, but look at that beautiful copper on all the raised words. It really has a lot of shine in real life. But to be honest with you, I don't want that ink in the background. I like a clean look even when I'm going for mixed media. So for the other backgrounds, I decided to switch to taking the ink pad directly to the raised area. Now that Lisa Horton metallic ink pad is a foam pad, and so it's kind of hard to drag along the raised areas. But these Altenew fresh dye inks are a firm felt pad, so they are excellent for just kind of lightly running over the raised areas. And now those raised words will have color on them. And I chose very light colors for those. So on one, I did the copper, on the rest, I just did a light color of dye ink. I really wanted to also use that other stencil that had the details on it. And I thought it'd be fun if I used some embossing paste to add even more texture. So I have the detail stencil placed following that example that's in the Altenew packaging, and I'm applying some Altenew embossing paste. And this will give us bright white against that colorful background. Now here I'm starting to overthink, trying to decide if I want to change the stencil from what they have on the package, but I stopped myself. I decided to just go with it because this is already a stretch for my creativity. I don't want to mess with it at this point. So I am putting a pretty thick layer of this embossing paste over each of the backgrounds. You can see how quick it is to do the 4 at once. So the nice thing about the 4 at once is I'll have 4 backgrounds and I can try different things on those backgrounds if I choose to do so. And I'm getting those repetitions in, which help my creativity, and I'll have lots of cards to pass on to others. Now my overthinking did win out a bit because that's who I am. I decided to add a little bit more of the embossing paste in some areas on the right once my first round of embossing paste was dry. By the way, as soon as I was done with this, I cleaned my work surface, the stencil, and my tool so that none of that paste dried. So now my card panels are done after this gets a little bit of time to dry. And I really felt good about them because I tried something new. I tried a design that is really out there for me and a color palette that is out there for me. However, I did some other things to it to make it my own by adding the texture, which I feel pulled together the background, and by doing some rules of 3, which I feel more comfortable with. It just worked for me, and I feel confident and better about doing this type of card. So next time I'll feel more creative when I want to try something new like this. To finish these panels, I trimmed them down a bit and glued them onto 4 1/4 by 5.5 inch white note cards. I'm adding simple sentiments using the older Altenew Timeless Sentiment die set. You can see all the dies included over there on the right. I use this one a lot. Today I'm using both thank you and hugs because it goes along with the background embossing folder I used. I originally thought that I would do a little bit different embellishments on all 4 of these cards, maybe a die cut white leaf or a vellum leaf, just to experiment some more. But I really like the backgrounds, so I decided to leave them as is. This is very different from me, but I've had so much fun doing so. And as I made so many cards together, I learned several things. First of all, I learned that I like to really build up that texture. So I did the embossing folder with the ink brushed on top, and I also did the embossing paste on top of that. I just think that's a really great background, and this will mail nicely. Now, another thing that I learned is that I really like when I do my colorful, bold stenciling like this on colored cardstock instead of white. I just feel like it pulls the background together more. So my favorite of all of these is the last one I'll share, which is the peach cardstock. That's the Altenew Pastel Sunrise, and then the colorful inks on top. So I wouldn't have learned that if I hadn't have tried different things, if I hadn't tried different colors of cardstocks to start out with. So that's part of building the creativity, is trying new things and seeing what you really like and what you're comfortable with. Okay, I'm going to move on to another set of cards. I really truly believe one of the best ways to build creativity is repetition. So that's why I'm making 4 cards at once instead of 1. And it really doesn't take much longer than you think it would. I started by choosing 4 colors to use for 4 cards. I'm doing blue, orange, pink, and teal. And I'm kind of going bold here. I'm trying something new. I went through my Altenew cardstock and I picked a dark and a medium for each of those color families. And then I also chose a dark and a medium green to use for the foliage on all of them. And by the way, I will share a closer look at the Altenew cardstock colors at the end of this video. Now with these 4 cards, I thought I'd talk about how you can build your creativity by the products you choose to use. I love using flower layering die sets. This new one from Altenew, the Coreopsis, is beautiful and it's very easy to use because it has that keyhole system that's unique to Altenew, and I'll talk about that in a moment. I am doing all of my die cutting first. I think it's best to get all of the die cutting done before we start gluing anything together because it'll keep me from getting overwhelmed if I tried to do it all at once. And the easier we make the process, the less overwhelming we make the process, the more calm and creative we can be. So I'm doing a bunch of die cutting here. I try to fill up my die cutting plates with as many dies as possible so that it'll save me time. You can see I'm die cutting the flowers from the cardstocks I chose and the leaves each time. I'm using my Spellbinders craft stacks. Those are the containers over there on the left to organize my little die cuts so that I can easily put them together when I'm done. Highly recommend those craft stacks. They are fantastic and they have lids that kind of lock on if you choose to use those. So I chose to use these layering flower dies because I know I love to put them together. I'm going with something I feel comfortable with. However, I'm going to change it up by adding some ink. I don't do this very often, but I am choosing to today just to get some practice. I have my Altenew micro blending brushes. These are small. There's 2 sizes in the pack and 4 brushes in one pack. And I'm applying a darker ink just to the center of all of my flower layers. You can see how quick this is to do. You don't need to spend time blending. And I'm using the smaller brush so I keep that ink towards the center. And I'll do this on all of our colors of cardstock, applying a darker color ink to that center. By the way, at the time I put up this video, you can get a free pack of these micro brushes with certain orders. I use these micro brushes a lot. I highly recommend them, and it's a great time to try them out. Now, I will say I experimented with ink here. On the pink, I went much darker to see if that contrast would be something I like. Sometimes I'm intimidated to do that, but it's about trying things out right now. And then on the blue ones, I thought I would try out putting some white pigment ink just on the tips of the petals and then dark ink at the center to really give even more contrast and that white kind of misty look at the tips. This would be beautiful on a Christmas flower, but today I'm trying it on blue. So here's an advantage of creating the 4 at once. For the teal and the orange, I just used dark ink in the center. For the pink, I'm trying a really dark ink at the center to see how I like it. And for the blue, I'm trying white on the tips and dark ink in the center to see if I like it. So by making multiples, I can try things out and compare them and see what I like, and I'll know that for the future. I can remember that for the future, and that will build my creativity. I will also add a darker green ink to the base of my leaves. Not spending much time on this, these inks will blend out and smooth on their own, and a lot of it will be covered anyway. And notice how nice this sticky mat is to work on. It's holding my die cuts in place, and I can quickly and easily add the ink to these, and that eliminates frustration, which is also something that's good for creativity, is to try to cut back on the frustration in any way you can with different tools and methods. All right, so now that we have all of our die cuts inked, let's start gluing them together. And this is where you can see that keyhole system that's unique to Altenew layering florals. I'm starting with my tray of teal colored flowers, and I've taken out all of the die cuts that have a keyhole opening at the center. See that keyhole shape at the center of all these pieces? That's going to make it easier to line these layers up. You don't have to do any thinking. You just line up the keyhole and the flower will turn out great in the end. So you don't really have to look at a guide. You don't have to think about it. So each time I put a little glue around the keyhole and then I place the next die cut on top. The die cuts also have a number engraved on them thanks to the dies, so I know what order to layer them even. So this is the keyhole system from Altenew. Many of their layering floral dies have this, and I really recommend them if you're looking for a layered look without a lot of complexity. It really makes it so much easier. There is a guide also in the packaging that shows how these layer, but you really don't need it thanks to the keyhole system. Now let's move on to the second layered flower that's in the same die set. All of these die cuts have a little arrow hole in the center. So last time it was keyhole shape, this time it's an arrow shape. So I know these get layered together. I put glue around the arrow and then put the next layer on. Again, just following the numbers that are engraved at the center of the die cuts next to the little hole. So for these cards, I chose a product that I'm comfortable with, that makes it easy to create. And by doing so, I can get more creative in other ways on the card. So really, that's another way to build your creativity. Make sure you have in your stash things that you're really confident about, comfortable with, and really like in the end. Don't feel pressured by what you see folks use in videos. If it's not your jam, don't do it. It is fun to try new things, but also be okay with focusing on what you enjoy creating. Okay, now we have all of our die cut flowers assembled. We need 4 backgrounds for the 4 cards, and I decided to make all 4 different. So I looked through my stash at things that I wanted to use, and also to try out different types of backgrounds so I know what I might like in the future for a similar card. So I first of all have the Altenew Build-A-Garden Breezy Petals. Now this has a stamp set and there are layering stencils, and I believe the coordinating dies are available separately. Look at the beautiful floral results that you can get with this. The layering stencils do a great job coloring this. However, what I'm going to do is take those large outline floral images and stamp them in black on my background and put the bold, colorful flowers at the center. Once I stamp that, I'll put it with my blue flowers in my little craft stacks and set it aside. For another background, I'll be using the Altenew Craft Your Life Wings and Petals. This is a really cool bundle, and you can see all the examples that are included here. So there is a stamp set, a layering stencil, embossing folder, and dies. And it gives a lot of different looks for one bundle. Now this embossing folder is the embossing folder I'll use on the background, but I just wanted to show you the other things. There are layering stencils that actually color that embossing folder. And then there are layering butterfly dies and the dies that coordinate with the 6x8 stamp set. A lot of different looks here that could be used together separately, but I'll just be using that embossing folder. So look at this beautiful background. It doesn't exactly go with the flowers I'm putting on top, but it'll look great in the end. It's just all about adding some texture to the background. For my third card, I will use that thank you embossing folder from before, but just using white cardstock. And for my fourth background, I'll use the Altenew Petal Palooza. I wasn't really sure about this folder, but man, when I used it, I absolutely loved it, and I'd definitely be using it again in the future. Such a cool dimensional look. So now I have my 4 different backgrounds and I can glue my cards together. Now I'm making 4 at a time. So what I'll do is create one first, get the placement just right, and then I can mimic the other designs from that one. So I used 4 different backgrounds on these 4 cards. I really believe another great way to build creativity is to incorporate an older product or a different product from your stash into your card, sometimes unexpectedly. And this will give you more use of your supplies. It'll remind you of supplies you have on hand, which will build your creativity up in the end. The more comfortable we are with our products, the more creative we can be with them in the future. By the way, the Take Care is from a die set I'll show you later in this video. I die cut the Take Care from Diamond Glitter Cardstock from Altenew. It's very subtle, and I thought that was nice because it let the bold colors stand out. And in the end, I'm finishing with a few yellow enamel dots on each of the cards. I really like the Altenew enamel dots. There are a lot of colors available, and they're not too bulky. I teamed each card up with a Altenew yellow envelope, and here are my 4 cards. They are similar, but I tried some new things out on each, which builds my creativity. So on this one, I did that black stamped background. I'm not sure about it in the end, but it definitely was fun to try. This pink one was my favorite, and I learned that I liked when I use high contrast dark color on lighter colors of cardstock. And I also learned that I really like this embossing folder background and I need to put it in my favorite stash so I can use it over and over again. So with these cards, I remind you that making multiples can be a good thing because you can try out different things on individual cards and compare. And it's good to pull in old supplies and use them again to build up that creativity and different ways to use them. All right, let's move on to my last set of cards. I had so much fun creating these stenciled backgrounds, and I kind of struggled with pulling them together in the end, but I had a lot of fun, and it really worked through my creativity and helps to build it in the long run. For these backgrounds, I'm using a brilliant layering stencil set from Altenew called Woven Ribbons. There are 3 stencils in the set, but you use each stencil twice and just rotate between, and it allows you to get a woven background in 6 different colors. To make things easier, I'm using a black Sharpie to write the stencil number on each and put a piece of clear tape over it to protect that Sharpie mark. Now, this is not something you have to do because the numbers are etched on the stencils, but I thought it would be helpful in the long run and easier to see. I'm once again making 4 cards, and I chose 2 white and then 2 light pool colored. And I'm starting with 6-inch pieces of both. I wanted to play more with that idea of stenciling on colored cardstock as opposed to white and get a comparison so I know for the future. I have my sticky mat along with an Altenew alignment guide. Each time I will put my cardstock into the corner of that L-shaped guide, and that way I know it'll line up each time. I'm putting stencil 1 onto the background. My cardstock and the stencil are the same size. I'm creating a hinge over on the right side with a large piece of tape. That way I can leave the stencil in place and change out my cardstock each time. I'm using a large blending brush this time because I plan to do the same color over the whole stencil, so it will save me time and makes it a lot faster to fill in that color. Once I've covered this entire piece with the dewdrop color, I will flip the stencil over to the right. See how I'm using that tape on the right as a hinge? And I'll remove this cardstock piece and move on to the next one because remember I'm doing 4 backgrounds the same. This time I'll put in a pool colored cardstock and flip the stencil back into place, tape it down, press it down, and do the same color. Now this time I'm putting a heavier amount of this light color because I'm doing so on a colored cardstock. Then I will flip the stencil over and pop in the next cardstock piece, each time putting it into the corner of that alignment guide. Flip the stencil back and ink it up. So this little hinge method with tape is a great way to make stenciling on multiple backgrounds easier. And you can learn more of this technique and kind of really step it up with a video that Christina has in that new online card class called So Very Merry. So many great tips in that one. All right, so I did this stenciling for the first stencil on all 4 backgrounds. Now I'm misting my stencil with a bit of rubbing alcohol and wiping it clean. With this stencil set, the second layer of stenciling is done with the same stencil, you just rotate the stencil. In the guide, it explains that, so it's really easy to figure out. So I'm still in stencil 1, but instead of having it like I did before, I'm rotating it 90 degrees and taping it down. And now we'll ink over this with a different color. This time I went with the same color family, but a bit darker. This is Aqualicious. I will apply that over the first cardstock piece, flip that stencil down with that hinge tape, put in my next cardstock piece, and repeat the process. Now I'm not going to show all 4, they're exactly the same. Each time I just flip that stencil down, put in the new cardstock color until I've done all 4 panels. Then I can remove that stencil and clean it for later use. You may notice that my inking isn't very even on all of these backgrounds I'm doing. I'm just doing quick inking. Remember, dye inks kind of smooth out on their own, so there's no need to stress to make it perfectly blended and evened. Let go of that and it'll allow you to be more creative. So I'm moving on to stencil number 2. On this, I'm doing the Eastern Sky Blue. I'm doing all blues, teals, and purples on this background. The example in the guide had multiple colors, like a rainbow of pastels, but I thought I would stick to something that I'm a little more comfortable with when doing a colorful background, and that is colors that kind of blend together a bit more. So I did stencil number 2 in the regular position, and then I rotated that stencil 90 degrees and I did another color. I actually think these in-between stages look pretty cool. You could stop as is, but I'm going to do the complete woven design. Here I have stencil number 3 lined up and I did purple. I did that on all of my backgrounds. And then the final step is to turn stencil number 3 90 degrees and do that on all of the backgrounds. And each time I did a different color, so I get these beautiful colors for this woven background. And look how gorgeous that is. With really quick inking and just fast application, you get great results. I am crazy about these results. I think it's beautiful. And now I'm comfortable with this layering set. So next time I could be a little more bold and creative with the colors I put on top. So again, practice and repetition with a product will make you more comfortable with it so you can be more creative the next time you use it. Here I'm trimming down a little bit off of each side, but I'm going to keep these little pieces and I'll show you what I'll do with those later. I just wanted to trim these down so I had a nice perfect pattern along it. Now it's time to create an element to add to this card. I thought I'd use all white and vellum die cuts so that background can stand out. For my die cuts, I'm using this Altenew layering die set. It's one of the keyhole die sets. This is actually from Altenew's Cozy Retreat that happened a couple months ago. It's not available for sale just yet, but I wanted to use it because I liked it so much. Do know that Altenew just came out with fresh flowers, which I'm showing a picture of here, which is very similar. So you could use that for a similar look. It also has the keyhole system. So I did my die cutting from white cardstock, and you can see these pieces all have that keyhole shape, so I know they layer together. By the way, I chose to use white cardstock for these flower die cuts so that they wouldn't distract from that busy woven pattern that we created, but they still have a lot of detail to them. So here's what this flower looks like. However, I decided to remove that center from it and instead layer up the second flower, which is smaller, and glue that on top of the big one. So instead of 2 flowers, one big, one small, I have one really full flower. So here are the die cuts for the second smaller flower. Off screen, I glued those together, and now I'll glue them onto the bigger layered flower I did before, add a flower center, and then we have this beautiful full flower. So that will be the focal point of my card, but it'll still allow my woven background to shine. I have 2 different backgrounds here. The one on the left, I used pool cardstock for my stenciling, and the one on the right, I used white cardstock for my stenciling, which I usually do. Turns out I like the pool one better that's in my hands. So by trying both, I have them side by side. I know which I like better, and I'll remember that for the future next time I have a layering stencil set that's similar to this one. I like the look of the color cardstock to begin with, a light color, and then white die cuts on top. Now for the sentiment on this, I am again using a die set that was from an Altenew class. I think it'll be released in the future, but they did release a very similar set, this one here called Scripty Sentiments. I can't wait to get this one. That would give a very similar look. But I chose the word thankful and I created it from white and silver cardstock. Now for the background of my card, I have a white note card, and then I have a piece of white cardstock where I used an older Altenew embossing folder. I again mentioned earlier that I love layers on layers, textures on textures, and I liked this textured kind of random foliage background, a nice contrast to that repeating woven pattern. For this card, I'm trying a design that I really haven't done much, and that is to put my background so that it's offset from the bottom right corner. I've done this at an angle, but I don't think I've done it straight in quite some time, so I'm trying it out here. I added my layered flower, and now I'm tucking some leaves behind it. I have a magnet holding it there at the center. I find that really helpful. I work on a glass magnetic work surface, and the magnets are great at holding things in place. I'm also tucking behind that some vellum leaf die cuts. That just adds a softness to it. Once I'm done, I can trim off the excess and I can save this piece for another card. I can get maybe even a couple cards out of that by cutting it up. I like that design, so I did that with the 2 backgrounds that I used starting with pool cardstock. For the 2 backgrounds I did starting with white cardstock, I thought it was a little bit too busy with the flower, so I kept the card simple and just added a sentiment. I did still use that leaf embossing folder on the background just for some added texture. To make my woven pattern stand out against the background, I did mat it with a piece of pool colored cardstock. This is an Altenew cardstock. And I'm gluing this at a bit of an angle at the top right corner just to add some interest to it. Once I have that in place and it dries a bit, I can trim off the excess and save that piece for another card. So I'm really going to get a lot of cards out of this. So I've glued my woven backgrounds down onto the leaf backgrounds, and I have my 3 cards. The one in the left will have a flower added to it. The 2 on the right will just have a sentiment. And here are the completed cards. Very simple, just gluing together after that point. So the 2 on the left have the pool cardstock with the inking done on top. The 2 on the right have the white cardstock with the inking done on top. And I could see the difference between them and how I was able to use them on a card. So now I know for the future, if I want to add something to it, it's good to start with a colored cardstock and ink on it. If I want to keep it simple, I can start with the white cardstock and add ink to it. Now that's my personal preference. You may play around and find something else out that works for you, but that is a way to build creativity. Try different things so you can compare them side by side. Now remember when I trimmed these backgrounds down, I had those little scraps left over and I said I'd show you what I was going to do with them. I have a white note card here and I'm gluing the strips down right up against each other at an angle, offsetting the pattern a little bit. This might sound a little odd, but I find one of the times I feel most creative is when I'm using up my little scraps like this. I have to get kind of creative on how to use them to create a card. And it is a great practice. It's leftover, right? You might have thrown these away. So if you create something with this and you don't like it, nothing's lost, right? So I encourage you to keep your little scraps and then actually put them to use to try to make a card with them. All I need to do is stamp a little sentiment along that and I have a card ready to go. And remember, I still have those other pieces for additional cards. So a big tip to build up your creativity, put your little scraps to good use. All right, now I have just a random card here. I was doing this for fun. I just really liked this product, so I made one with it. And I didn't put any creative thinking into it. I just made a card. And sometimes that's just what you need to keep creating, is to do something that's simple and comfortable for you. Not try something new. Just take a step back and create for the sake of creating. You don't always have to do something you haven't done before. And also remember, some people just want to create and not like experiment and try new things. That is fine. If you like to watch videos and just make what you see, go for it. Well, in this case, I just wanted to follow the guide and make a card, and I really liked the stencil set. Now, I'm not going to show the stenciling because I just followed the guide. It wasn't hard to do. But I end up with this beautiful stenciled image. And the cool thing about this particular bundle from Altenew is it stencils along with the stamp set. And the stamp set allows you to put little details at the center of your stenciled flowers. I'm using brown ink for the first layer, and then I'll use copper ink for the second layer. I'm using my Stampwheel 2.0. I'll talk more about the Stampwheel 2.0 in a video coming out soon, but you can see it's very easy to use and to add your stamping. Now, again, I used that Lisa Horton copper ink, and you can see the shine that I get at the center of those flowers. I love the result of this, and I plan to make more and do a set of cards like that for a holiday gift. Now to finish off the card, I used that thank you embossing folder on the background and the just a note sentiment that comes with that stencil set. I chose to leave the leaf hanging off the edge of the card, so I will put this in a larger A6 envelope, but you could put it in a regular envelope if you trim that off. So in creating this card, I used products I feel confident in, and I just had fun. And now I feel more comfortable and confident for the next time I craft, which will help with my creativity. Now, before we go, I wanted to just show you the Altenew cardstocks. I've been getting a lot of questions about these cardstocks, and they just came out with more colors. They keep coming out with more and more. The reason I'm really liking these Altenew cardstocks is there are colors that are different than colors I already had in my stash. Some colors overlap between companies because they get them from the same paper mill, but I find that Altenew has a lot of unique colors. Now, I made my color swatches with all the colors, and I'm going to flip through them. Now, I know I'm flipping through them quickly. It's just to save time in the video. But feel free to hit the pause button if you see a color you like so you can write down that color name. Now these I think are like between 80 and 90 pound. So I don't make card bases from these, but I use them for everything else. If I did want to make a card base from this cardstock, I would definitely put a white cardstock panel on the inside just to give it more strength. I will admit I am a cardstock junkie. I like to have all of the colors of cardstock. I just like to have them on hand, and I really do put them to use. By the way, many of the Altenew cardstock colors do match inks that they have, which you can see from some of the names. So it is helpful when you're crafting. By the way, my two favorites of the whole collection are the really bold bluish purples and the other blues in the collection. I feel like a lot of these blues are very unique, and you can see how some of them, like this cloudy sky and these next couple, go so well together. And here are the two bold blues, like bluish purple. I used them on the flower earlier. I really like those. So again, feel free to hit pause on any of these to get a closer look. I will be sure to use more of these in the future so you can see which of these are unique and which I like the most. I know folks are going to ask about my swatch ring. I kind of go overboard with my swatch rings because I really like colors and really in particular about my cardstocks matching and such. So when I get a new cardstock color, I die cut 4 tags like you see here. I bought 4 dies from Simon Says Stamp so I can do them all at once. I put one set of the tags together on a ring like this. So these are all my Altenew cardstock colors. The other sets I use so I can mix them with other brands when I find different colors that work well together. I find that helpful to me. Not everyone finds swatching helpful, but if you struggle with getting colors that go together, I do recommend trying a swatch ring. It can be very helpful. I am still in the middle of reorganizing my cardstock and finishing up my swatches. I do promise to do a video on that when it's complete, hopefully in the next couple of months. All right, there you have a look at the new Altenew cardstock. Some of these are new colors, some have been out for a while, but this collection of cardstocks is new this year. And you have some tips for building creativity. Now, there are a lot of other things you can do to build creativity, but really it's all about learning. Learning new things, learning by doing repetition, and just trying things out in your craft room. The more confident you are, the more creative you'll be. If you're interested in the supplies I used or the videos I talked about, they are linked below in my YouTube description. You can also look here at 2 related videos. I appreciate this time you spent with me as always, and I will see you again soon in another video.